my name is Avishai Deshpande, and this will be my informative for Nationals 2023. I want you to think back to your childhood. What was your biggest fear? Maybe it was going down that really tall slide, or was it ordering your own meal at Chick-fil-A? When we're young, we have small fears, which are normal for human beings. But as we get older, all those fears and problems morph into a giant mosaic of something different and by far more dangerous. They become what are known as infamous mental block. I'm sure you've heard about mental blocks from gymnasts or singers about how they can't do that flip or hit that high note. You may have thought that mental blocks don't apply to you. I'm here to tell you that they do. All of us have mental blocks, even if we don't know it yet. This is normal as billionaires driving cool cars. I'll be informing you about mental blocks through 3 points. What are mental blocks, the types of mental blocks, and the epic cure to these vexing problems. The main sources of my speech today are Science Direct, Right Blogs, Better Up, and a random Korean drama. It'll make sense in the end. If we do not remove our mental blocks, we will continue to suffer, being weighed down by these seemingly small but extremely heavy mental blocks. Point 1. What are mental blocks? Though we all have them, for some they may be hard to understand. The Sage Neuroscience Center describes them as our brains reaching a barrier in accessing creativity, motivation, or productivity. Professionals use a story to help illustrate mental blocks, which I'll present now, but I've given it my own twist. There was once a farmer heading into town to sell his 3 donkeys. Let's call them Donkey 1, Donkey 2, and Fred. But on the way, he saw a mango tree, so he tied his donkeys to a nearby post. He tied Donkey 1, Donkey 2, and only then did he realize he only brought 2 ropes. He didn't know what to do. He obviously couldn't let Fred roam free. But then a fairy appeared and told him to pretend to tie Fred to the post. He was reluctant at first, but he did eventually pretend to tie Fred to the post. Next, he went up the tree and got a few mangoes. Then he untied his remaining donkeys and led them away. He only went a few steps before he realized that Fred was still standing next to the post. He went over to him and tried multiple ways to get him to move. Fred wouldn't budge. But then the fairy reappeared and told him to pretend to cut Fred loose. And as soon as he did, Fred bolted away. This is how mental blocks work. They are our invisible ropes that aren't really there, even if they feel like it at the moment. One of the main characteristics of mental blocks is setting false limits for us. False limits are exactly what they sound like. Limits on what we can do that simply aren't true. Examples of this are not being able to read long books or able to eat healthy. I used to think I could never be good at math. But after using the cure, which I'll get to later, I'm not doing half bad. The thing is, many people just give up after a mental block is discovered, and many great things are left undone, leaving a towering block where progress once stood. Point 2. The types of mental blocks. Many people, from bloggers to scientists, agree that there are 3 general categories of mental blocks. The first is a bit better known. The professionals call them tip of tongue, or TOT for short. Symptoms include fuzzy focus, decipher something, not being able to make decisions, and the good old writer's block. It occurs when someone overthinks about something for too long and usually ends up giving either a completely overcomplicated answer or being completely clueless on what to do. These blocks dump our creativity, like the writer's block clogs your word flow when writing, leaving something at the tip of your tongue. The second category is what I like to call fearful blocks. The professionals also call these self-sabotage. Long-term fears, dislike for someone, bad self-imagery, athlete's anxiety, social anxiety, and just plain old irrational phobias fall under this umbrella. You see, when we fear for a long stretch of time, these fears become blocks that hinder a great potential. Let's say you were afraid of going to the doctor when you were young. As an adult with control over most of your decisions, you wouldn't go to the doctor and might manifest an odd liking of apples. You see, when children have fears, that's normal. But when adults have fears, it's also normal, unless you're scared of going to the doctor. In most cases, that would just be annoying. Hold on, I see you there. Wait a minute, what if they're mistreated in the doctor's office as a kid? That seems like a valid reason. To this I say, yes. But at this point, you're not talking about mental blocks. You're referring to trauma. There is a big difference between the two. A mental block is a childish, irrational fear manifested into adulthood. Trauma, on the other hand, is real, rational, verified fear that is breaking the mind of its inhabitant, both old and young. If it's a childish fear, it's a mental block. If it goes too far, that's trauma. So that means mental blocks can be annoying, and that's it, right? Wrong. They will almost always get worse. Take me, for example. My biggest mental block was talking to people, anxiety. Looking back now, I see that it was just a large mental block. It was not trauma, it was completely irrational. And it started off small, but it just kept getting bigger. In fact, it got so bad that I had to get professional treatment from my favorite doctor. I'll list his contact information later. But then, I learned that we can destroy these before the need of such pricey therapies. This might surprise you, but all my sources agree that the cure, the breakthrough for all mental blocks, is yet another mental block category. Point 3, the cure. I can't tell. Are you annoyed or intrigued about how many mental blocks exist? Don't worry, this is the last one. This last category is what I like to call anti-blocks. These are mental blocks that act as a barrier to our own selfish or evil wantings. Anti-blocks can be formulated by either tip of tongue or fearful blocks, and because of that, they are the cure for all mental blocks. Oh, and anti-blocks also have a common name. People call it goals. That changes the game for a few of you. Those with type A personality in the room are probably like, so what? You guys are lucky. Goals for the rest of us are like the long road trips that aren't the fun kind. Look, I will be the first to admit that goals stink. They really do. But this cure is not just any goal. I wouldn't be explaining it if it was. I think Dr. Ruplin, who is a doctor, obviously, and an esteemed philosopher, explains it quite well. She said, quote, "Don't let mental blocks control you. Set yourself free. Confront your fear and turn your mental blocks into building blocks." End quote. These are a ladder of goals, a series of short, obtainable, achievable goals. For example, instead of setting one large goal, set many smaller goals. And we climb this ladder by continuing on to the next small goal, again and again, till we've overcome our block. But how do we do that? I get it, setting goals is hard, even small ones. I actually have a personal example of how this works. Just the other day, I thought to ask Elon Musk for a free Tesla. I didn't do it. But remember, irrational fear is a mental block, so we can fix this by using our ladder of goals. Let's say you want to ask for a raise at your job. Start off with talking to strangers, maybe asking someone you're scared of for something. The more comfortably you are talking to people you're scared of, your boss, the easier it will be to ask for a raise. Continue up this ladder until you're at the last step, standing right across from your boss. This moment's the scariest part, but isn't the hardest. A character in a Korean drama called "It's Okay to Not Be Okay" once said that, quote, "The first step is always the hardest, but once you take it, things will get easier from then on," end quote. You see, finding your block is one thing, but taking the action to fix it, that's the harder thing. We won't get anywhere if we stop taking the next step. We first have to find our block, take action to fix it, make our ladder of goals, and then climb with consistency. That is the cure. So, in conclusion, I believe that mental blocks are a serious and overlooked problem. Not a lot of people understand how dangerous these really are. And this cure is not flawless by all means. I practice this method and I still have mental blocks. So why go through with this plan if you can't eradicate these for good? It's like using a sifter. You know, the blocks that break are like the grains of sand, falling away, revealing what they're holding back the entire time. The person God created us to be. So you see, the more we break, the closer we are to God. And yeah, we all need some sort of professional therapy every now and then, but what is that? It can be your parents, it can be your doctor. But the only professional therapy that is guaranteed to work is Jesus. He's the favorite doctor I mentioned earlier. Quote, "I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your hand and says to you, 'Do not fear, I will help you,'" end quote. Isaiah 41:13. God helped me out of my anxiety, and I'm sure he'll do the same for you. To wrap up, I want you to think about right now. At present, what is your greatest fear? Your greatest block? Maybe it's asking for promotion at your job, or is it admitting that you need help? Or maybe it's still ordering your meal at Chick-fil-A. Look, whatever it may be, no matter how big or how hard it can seem, remember this: you can. You can get that raise. You can march up to that counter and place your order. that breakthrough can be yours. With God's help, mental blocks can break, will break, and already have. Thank you.